like my church just like it is. We are a whatever size you want to say, we are a this size church, and I like it just like it is. Very discouraging statement, but it's one that people say, and it's one that probably a lot more people who don't say that is something that they think about. But I want you to think about, for those of you who are concerned about seeing your church grow. Now, I'm not a church growth guru by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, what most people call church growth is really just adding numbers, and that could or could not be a good thing, however you want to look at that. But there are some people who say, I want to see my church grow. Now, what would it take to see that? You know, you can look around, you can look around you, and you can say, you know what, there's just a few people around here that I know. I've had a lot of folks who have told me, you know, everybody that I know already goes to church. I don't really know any prospects that are around me because everybody that I know has already decided what church they're going to go to. Well, I want to kind of hopefully open your eyes to something this morning. I did a little bit of research about Green Acres Baptist Church. Did a little bit of digging, and I found something that I thought was very interesting. If you were to drive what the study says was 15 minutes, but now I know a little bit about Warner Robins, having lived my first 27 years here, or I think actually my first 30 years here. I lived 30 years here, and I know that it would not take 15 minutes to get to the distances that they say. So really, realistically, you're talking 10 to 12 minutes in any direction. Within a 10 to 12 minute drive of where you are sitting right now. Did you realize that there are 106,061 people? Okay? In excess of 100,000 people from where you are at this very moment. In fact, the numbers would tell you that there are 41,186 households. That's a massive number of people. You are in the midst of a prospect gold mine. In fact, the statistics would also say that only 14% of those people claim to attend a church weekly. 14% of those people are in church right now. Not only that, but only 34% of those people claim to be a member of an evangelical church at all. Now, I'm not a genius. I'm not a mathematician. That's why God invented cell phones with calculators on them. And so I did just a little bit of calculation. And I took 34% of 106,061 people, and the result is this: an even 70,000 people are within a 10 to 12 minute drive of where you are right now. 70,000 people who are not a part of a gospel church. You can never, ever say that you simply don't have the prospects. They are out there. Now, I want to talk to you about an extremely important aspect of what it would take for you to reach those people. Now, again, I realize I'm very realistic. I'm not naive. I realize that not everybody who's under the sound of my voice wants to go and reach those 70,000 people. But for those of you that you would say, that matters to me. It matters to me that there are 70,000 people within 10 minutes of where I am right now that in all likelihood, if they were to die today, they would end up eternally separated from God, and that bothers me. I want to talk to you about a very important aspect of how you can reach them. Now, there are a lot of ways, listen, when I say it like that, there are a lot of different directions that I could go. I could talk about Grow. Y'all been doing Grow for, 12, 15 years, somewhere in that time frame. And for those of you who have been faithful through all those years, and you come week after week and you write letters or you go make phone calls or go make visits or whatever it is that you do, listen, kudos to you. And I understand that as much work as you have done, there is still so much work that is out there. That's why we continually ask, hey, come help us reach out. I could talk about Grow. I could talk about Awana. I could talk about the Wind Shape. Is that the event that y'all were talking about. Man, we could talk about so many different aspects. So many different things that could affect you being able to reach those 70,000 people. But I want to talk about something different. I hope you turn with me into the book of Acts, and I'm sorry to take you through the book of Acts. I know that y'all have been here, and y'all, in fact, I warned Johnny. I said, listen, I'm going to go back and talk about something y'all have already talked about. I want you to turn to Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. And I want us to see two great growth statements. Great growth statements in Acts chapter 2. And then we're going to point out something that I'm sure Johnny did a great job of pointing out to you again, but I just don't believe that we can talk about this kind of thing enough. In Acts chapter 2, notice in verse 41 what statement it gives, the report that we are given. In verse 41, it says, "So then those who had received his word were baptized. And that day there were added about 3,000 souls." Now, 3,000 sounds like a lot, but you think about it, that's really just a drop in the bucket to 70,000 that are within a 10-minute range of your church. There were added 3,000 souls. That's the report. And then chapter 2 ends by giving another growth report in the last part of verse 47. "And the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved." Two great growth statements. But I want you to notice, these are just bookends. These are just bookend statements. They start by introducing a story, and they end by summarizing the story. What is it that takes place in between? That has to matter a great deal for these two bookend statements. Let's read that. Verse 42. "They were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone kept feeling a sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. And all those who had believed were together and had all things in common. And they began selling their property and possessions and were sharing them with all as anyone might have need. Day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people." Now, this wasn't a strategy. There was no mission statement involved in this. There was no vision statement involved in this. Not that there's anything wrong with those. They had their place. But there was none of that. This was simply the natural outflow of what it meant to be a follower of Jesus Christ. They didn't have someone tell them, "Hey, this is what you do. This is the how you start, and this is how you end. This is the Bible that you follow. This is the New Testament that you have." They didn't have any of that to guide them. They simply were doing what believers do because they're believers. And as a result, they began to reach a massive number of people in their very midst. So, what is it that they were doing that just flowed naturally through them, that just was a normal outflow of the life of a believer? It's a word that we take for granted. It's called fellowship. And it's true fellowship. And notice this now. Everybody was involved. This is important, leading up to what I'm going to be talking about. This may be like the longest introduction in the history of sermons, but I'm going to get there eventually, okay? Everyone was involved. Notice that verse 42 is a conclusion summary of what took place in verse 41. There were so many people, there were so many souls that were being added, 3,000 souls were added, and they started getting involved in the learning of the apostles' teaching and the prayer and the fellowship. It's a summary of what took place in verse 41. So that was something that new believers were doing. But then you get verse 42 through 47, and that's what that was like the whole Christian community. It's what everybody was doing. It was what mature Christians were doing. It was what new Christians were doing. all believers were involving themselves in this kind of fellowship. It was for the newbies, and it was for the mature, those who'd been around a while. It's kind of interesting because it's weird what you hear. It's weird what people actually come out and tell preachers. And they've just come to me and they've said, well, I've done Sunday school. I did Sunday school for years, and I pretty much learned all that stuff. I know what they're going to talk about. I really don't need to go anymore. Don't tell them that. That's not how they operated. Listen, fellowship is for all people. It's for all believers, and it's a natural outflow. It's what we do by instinct because the Holy Spirit resides within us. It's that fellowship. That's why Hebrews 11:25 calls for more and more fellowship the more you see the day coming, the day that the Lord is going to return. Now, what is fellowship? I like how John MacArthur, he defines it. Fellowship is the spiritual duty of believers to stimulate each other to holiness and faithfulness. It's where we stimulate one another to holiness and faithfulness. But how do we do that best? How is fellowship going to best occur? Do we need to get up and say, hey, we're going to have a fellowship after church. We're going to have some ice cream, or we're going to have some fellowship after Sunday morning church. We're going to have some fried chicken and some green beans, and everybody's just going to gather together. And we're just going to have a good time fellowshipping with one another. Is that where true fellowship takes place the most? We can just get a bunch of people there. A bunch of people in the same room. We can all laugh and have a good time. And of course, we're Baptists, so we have to eat something. And those guys, is that where fellowship takes place? This kind of fellowship takes place the best? I would say no. There's a study that came out over the last few years. Reuben Dunbar, he's an anthropologist and a psychologist from the University of Oxford. And he did an in-depth study and a survey and found that we have, on average, a normal human being, the average human being, has 150 casual friends. We have 150 casual friends. Now, by casual friends, if you want to kind of get a picture of what a casual friend would be in his definition, it's somebody that you would, if you were to have a Super Bowl party, or if you're going to have some kind of a big gathering and you just wanted a big crowd there, you would think of 150 people, and those are the people that you would invite. You would invite them maybe to a wedding of some kind. 150 casual friends. But that number shrinks to 50 when we're talking about people that we would say that we are somewhat close to. These are the people that we see often. They might not be our dearest friends, but these are the people that we come in contact with on a regular basis, and we would say that we're pretty close to them. But he also found that we have a circle of about 15 friends that we could truly confide in. 15 people that we could really, really trust. Now, MIT took his research, and I'm not really sure, kind of cloudy on the details. They may have included him on that study, but took it a little bit further. And this occurred just back in 2016. And they worked off of his research and found that we can really accommodate, check this out now, we can accommodate only 5 best friends. I mean, best friends. We can only accommodate 5 at a time in our lives. That's all that our brains, literally our brains, can handle. Scientific study, 5. That's it. Now here's the point. The closer you get to someone, the fewer that you can accommodate with that closeness. So that if we're going to experience fellowship the way that we find here in Acts chapter 2, if we're going to really experience that kind of fellowship in our lives where we are, in our spiritual lives, growing closer and closer and closer to someone, the group has to shrink smaller and smaller and smaller, because we cannot, by nature of who we are, by nature of our creation, we cannot accommodate more than that. Fellowship, the way that we find it in the Bible, is best experienced, listen to me, in smaller groups. Now, we can have a kind of a fellowship in a room this size with this number of people. But to have the fellowship that we are about to discuss here out of Acts chapter 2, it can only come in small groups. Now, I'm not saying that it has to be 5. I'm not saying that it has to be 15. I'm not putting a number on it. I'm just saying that the greater the fellowship, the smaller the group becomes. Now, in a church like a Baptist church, there is what we call a strategy for small groups. Because we want to experience that kind of fellowship. We want to experience biblical fellowship. And that small group strategy, at least the one that is exercised here at Green Acres Baptist Church, that small group strategy is called Sunday school. Now, you can go to other churches and they might have a different kind of a strategy. They might have what they call life groups or family groups or some other kind of groups. They're going to tag some name to it, but it's simply going to be, in its clearest form, it's simply going to be their small group strategy. And you think Sunday school has been around since Jesus. It hasn't been around since Jesus. It's only been around 150 years or so. But it's a small group strategy. That's all that it is. It's just given a name, Sunday school. But man, it is vitally important in the life of a believer. It's vitally important in the life of a church. And whatever small group strategy is implemented, it is vital to that church's outreach and its ability to affect the lives of the community that it has been placed in. That is what we see in Acts chapter 2. That's why they're having such great success. That's why it has a bookend. They were doing great in outreach here. They were doing great in outreach here. What made the difference? It's what happened in between, and it has to do with how these people related to one another. And like it or not, you as an individual believer, certainly as a church, but you as an individual believer, you need that kind of fellowship. You were saved and created with a new creation to need that kind of fellowship. Listen, let me just say it like this. Let me get to the point. Quit beating around the bush. You as an individual need a Sunday school class. Now, just because you go to Sunday school, just because you have Sunday school, just because you have small groups, honestly, that doesn't mean that you're experiencing true fellowship. You can be a Sunday school teacher, you can be in your same class, you can have your same class for the last 50 years and not have real fellowship. I want to talk to you this morning, as if I haven't already talked to you. I'm going to talk to you this morning about small groups that will transform your church. In other words, how does your Sunday school class what characteristics does it need to accept in order to experience true fellowship? Now, I'm about to scare everybody in this room, okay? I have 8 characteristics, 8 descriptions based off of Acts chapter 2. 8 descriptions that needs to describe your class so that you can experience true fellowship. Now, the reason that some of you are scared right now is you've already heard the longest introduction of all introductions in the history of preaching, probably. And so now you're hearing 8 and you're thinking, we're going to be here as long as Pastor Johnny preaches. I'm not going to do that to you, okay? I'm going to do my best to fly through these so you can at least beat the Methodists to the restaurant. So hang with me. The points are going to be right behind me. You write those down. Listen quickly. I'll talk quickly. You write quickly, and we'll be out of here, okay? Now, here are 8 characteristics of small groups that will transform your church, what real fellowship looks like. Here's the first thing that we find. Attenders are bonded together. The attenders in this small group class are bonded together. Notice what it says in verse 42. That these believers were coming together. They were devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. The word fellowship you've probably heard before. The Greek word is koinonia. It's koinonia. And that Greek word, it literally means partnership or sharing. It's not just, fellowship isn't just having a fellowship. You don't just throw a fellowship. You don't just put on this party and call it a fellowship. True koinonia is a partnership or sharing. You ever been in a partnership with someone before? It might have been in a business. It might have been to do a school project. It might have been just to do some yard work. Or your marriage, you're in a partnership and you are bonded together by something that is greater than yourself, is greater than the two of you. And you are bonded together. Now, in your small group, in your Sunday school class, you should be bonding together. There should be something that is causing you to become closer and closer as members of that class, or even just attenders. I don't want to restrict it to those who have put their name on a roll. But attenders are bonded together. Number 2, attenders share everyday life. They share everyday life. In verse 42, we see that they're breaking bread. They're in prayer together. In verse 46, we see that day by day they were continuing with one mind in the temple. They were going to church together, and then they were breaking bread from house to house. Listen, I'm not saying that you have to go house to house. You might end up going to the Waffle House or to the Huddle House. But you're going somewhere. You're doing something where you're just sharing everyday life together. We have, you walk through the halls of this church, and eventually you're going to end up at what you call a fellowship hall. And we've kind of, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, every church has what they call a fellowship hall. But what it kind of does to our mind is we think if we're going to have fellowship, it's going to happen in a hallway back there. If we have fellowship, it's going to happen in that Sunday school class. Listen, if you want to experience true fellowship within your class, you have to see it as expanding beyond the four walls of that classroom and even beyond the four walls of this church. Your fellowship ought to spill out into other places. Every now and then, you ought to be saying in the middle of the Sunday school, hey, let's go out and eat together after church today. Let's go hang out. Let's go do something away from the church. Fellowship can't be contained to a building. Do something outside of your Sunday school class with your Sunday school class. Attenders share everyday life. Number 3, attenders, here we go. Some of y'all aren't going to like this. Attenders are faithful. They're faithful. Those who had believed were together. They had all things in common. Verse 46, day by day, it was a continual thing. Folks, it is greatly discouraging for someone like me. Pastor Johnny, your pastor's never told me that he's discouraged about it, but it's got to be discouraging for so many pastors because the culture that we're in today says that, you know what, church is optional. Now, ain't nobody going to say that. Nobody going to say that. But church is optional. Sunday school, optional. If I don't have a better idea, if I don't have a better offer, then I'll go to church. If it looks good today, golf course sounds good, the pond sounds good, going to hang out over here sounds good. And if I don't have anything else to do, I'll go to church. If there's not a family engagement, I'll go to church. If there's not a ball game I want to see, I'll go to church. If the race ain't on, I'll go to church. As long as there's nothing better, I'll go to church. You see, there's been a great cultural shift that says that this is one of a lot of different options. It's just that doesn't match what I see going on with the characters in Scripture who were consumed by this thing and they wanted to be there, and sure there were other options, but this was the option that was at the top of the list. And I will be faithful to that. knowing what was done for me and knowing the change that has come in my life, I can't help but do anything else. You see, in a church where, and in a Sunday school class where true fellowship takes place, those people are faithful. And they're not going to let a whole lot of other things get in the way of them being there. They know that they are counted on. Number 4, attenders are transparent. That's a big word. I'm glad we have it up here. Attenders are transparent. Can I just tell you something? Let's have a little honesty session here. Because honesty is one of the most difficult things to do at church. One of the scariest, most intimidating places to be transparent. Right here. In church. I mean, we come in and we're supposed to have everything together. I mean, we're Christians. We have Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit resides in me. The Holy Spirit gives me all the answers. The Holy Spirit gives me all the strength that I need. And so therefore I have no problems. It is the scariest place to walk in to this building, to walk into those small classrooms and say, I am struggling. I'm hurting today. Let me just tell you, my husband just threatened to walk out on us. My son is now saying that he has homosexual tendencies. I tell you what, man, I walked into that bar the other day and I wanted so bad to take a drink, and guess what? I did. How many times do you hear that mess at church? Let me tell you something. Ain't nobody got it all figured out. You ain't got it figured out. Your Sunday school teacher ain't got it figured out. Your preacher ain't got it figured out. We ain't got it figured out. And yet we walk in and we think that everybody there's got it figured out except me, and so I got to play the game. I got to play along so everybody thinks that I got it all together. Stop that mess. Why? Listen, I was just reading this morning a story from Chuck Swindoll, and he was talking about how somebody who used to just have this, checkered past. He was an alcoholic, and he cheated on his wife. He did all kind of, he was ex-military, and he'd just gotten into everything. And one day he got saved. And he came to Chuck Swindoll one day, and he said, you know, one of the things I'm having the hardest time finding is I'm just having the hardest time finding somebody that I can relate to. He said, you just can't talk with people in church. I just need somebody I can just let my hair down and talk about my struggles with. He said, you know where the greatest place to find people that you can just let it all hang out with? Listen, in the bar. You go to a bar, they don't care what you say. You can tell them whatever you want to, and everybody's be fine with it. Church ought to be the place where we can go to. Our Sunday school classes ought to be the safest place on the planet for somebody to walk in and just say, I just want to be real this morning. I am messed up. It seems like everything in my life is messed up, and I need help. Can they do that in your class? Sunday school teacher, can they walk into your class and just be honest for a change? Without being preached to or looked down upon or talked about when you leave? I'll tell you something. True fellowship takes place when attenders are and allowed to be transparent. Now notice what happens in verse 45b. It says there that they were sharing with them as anyone might have need. Well, in order to be able to share with somebody who had need, they had to walk in to be able to express that need. Man, I just flat ran out of money. It was my own fault. I did some stupid stuff with my money. I ain't got no money now. I can't provide. I gotta get back on my feet. Well, here, let us help you. They had to walk in. They had to express their needs. They had to be transparent about what was going on in their life in order for their small group to do anything about what they were facing. You need to be able to be transparent. And you need to provide a place of transparency, safe transparency for the people who walk into this building. Because let me tell you something. If there are 70,000 people, actually there are 106,000 people, there are 106,000 needs times however much. Because we all struggle. We all got problems. And ain't a single one of us got it all figured out. Attenders are transparent. Number 5, better get moving so y'all can get to the restaurant. Number 5, attenders meet practical needs. Once that transparency is expressed and the needs are shown, those small groups did whatever they could to help meet those needs. They went and it cost them individually. They went and sold their own stuff so they can meet the needs over here. And in a class where true fellowship is taking place, there is a meeting of practical needs within that class. That is what they are doing. What is your class doing to meet practical needs? Now I'm going to make a statement here, and it kind of makes me nervous. Y'all may not let me back after saying this, because you don't really know me. You don't know what I believe about the Bible. There ain't a word in there that I doubt. Not a single word in there that I doubt. I believe it from cover to cover. I believe every last word that's in there. And I love the Bible. I believe the Bible. I wish I could live the Bible like I wanted to live the Bible. I know that the Bible is from God, and I know how important that Bible is when you come into church. You need to thank God for your pastor, who will stand up here week after week, and he's not concerned about entertaining you or anybody else. He knows as well as everybody that as well as most preachers, that not everybody likes to start from chapter 1, verse 1 of a book and then work their way through the end. But let me tell you something, there's nothing better for the health of a church than for a pastor to take them through books of the Bible the way that your pastor is doing. You need to thank God for your pastor. I love the Bible, and I believe the Bible is so vital to the life of a church and an individual in a Sunday school class. But listen to me. If your Sunday school class is like most Sunday school classes, and I don't just mean like in this church, I mean everywhere, and all you're doing week after week is walking in, doing a Bible study, and walking out, you are not functioning as a New Testament small group. These small groups were about not just studying the Bible. They did. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. No question about that. But they also put what they were learning into action and began to meet the practical needs of the people who are around them. And those needs were great. And so your class should be seeking ways. What can we do for someone either in this class or a prospect for this class or someone who is out there in the world who needs help? And there's not a single class that is at Green Acres Baptist Church that cannot meet practical needs. Now your class, you may be the oldest class there is. You may be in that class. I've had people, my last pastorate, we had a cemetery that was right out in front of the church, and I had people who told me, say, yeah, well, my next graduation class is going to be going across the street. Okay, so maybe you're in the oldest class at Green Acres Baptist Church. You can still do, you may not be able to go out and rake somebody's yard or clean out gutters or whatever, but man, there are still some practical needs that you can meet, maybe the only way that you can. It might be financially, it might be through prayer needs, it might just be keeping in touch, it might be driving somebody to doctor's visits, I don't know what it might be. But you can still do that. The youngest class, you can go down to the preschool department at Green Acres Baptist Church, and your class can meet practical needs. Imagine the imprint that you can make in the life of those little children when they are beginning to meet needs. You want to know some of the greatest gifts that I ever got at church? Greatest gifts I ever got as a pastor is when the preschool class would bring me their homemade cards. I mean, you couldn't read a single thing on those, and it was the ugliest hearts you ever saw, but they were the prettiest things I ever saw. They can't draw worth a lick, but man, it just means a lot. Do that kind of stuff. You're teaching those kids a whole lot more than if you sat down and sang some songs to them. Teach them the Word and then teach them to practice that Word. These folks, these attenders were meeting practical needs. They were selling their property in verse 45 and sharing with them all. Number 6, attenders share a unified direction. Verse 46 says they were day by day continuing with one mind in the temple. They had a unified direction. You know what I hate about this time of year? I mean, I can't believe that we're in February and we're already talking about the fall, the spring. But let's just say we're in the spring. You know what I hate about spring? Ants. Ants. They drive me bananas. And the yard I'm living in now, I ain't never seen ants like I'm seeing now. I mean, they are like everywhere. You cannot turn anywhere. There are ants all over the yard. They have their mounds. They got a line over here. They got a line over there. You kill them over here. They move over here. You can't do nothing about them. Ants. They drive me bananas. But let me tell you something. You go over to an ant bed, one that's packed up this high, and just go kick it like that. Okay? It's kind of fun to watch them, sprinkle all over the place, and they fall around. They get all ticked off. Walk away. Come back the next day. Guess what? Right back where it was. Just like it was. It makes me even more mad. You know what they did? They got together, and somewhere in their minds, like as soon as they got over being ticked off, they said, let's build this thing again. And they all got together, and they built that thing again in like overnight. How do they do that? Because they have a unified direction. They got one person, one little queen in there. Wouldn't you know it's a woman? Oh, I didn't say that. And says, this is what you're going to do. And the men say, yes, sir. And they all go and they all build it together. They have a unified direction. Now, I will say, because I believe there are certain ways that the Bible teaches us how to do church. You can't have a class over here saying, well, we got our direction. Another class over here saying, we got our direction. Another one over here saying, we got our direction. No. You look to your head, you look to your pastor who says this is our church direction, and then the classes buy into that, and they say, you know what? We're gonna fit into that direction by doing this. And they get together and they start working on that thing, and who knows what a single class, how far a single class can take a church because they have a unified direction. These guys, these small groups, they were with one mind, a unified direction. Number 7. We also see that they were breaking bread in verse 46 from house to house, and they were taking their meals together with gladness. Attenders display joy. Joy. Well, I had to get up. The game went late last night, but that preacher, he said that we got to be faithful. So yeah, I got up. Here I am. Don't ask me to share. I don't want to share nothing. I'm not in the mood. No, attenders display joy. And joy extends beyond our circumstances. Listen, let me remind you of the context. We're not talking about, people who are high up, people who had it easy, people who had jobs and houses and boats and cars. We're not talking about people who had it easy. We're talking about people who were persecuted. Some people think the persecution started with Paul, when Paul began to persecute Saul and then go from house to house later on in the book of Acts. Nope. Let me remind you, right after the disciples had gathered, they realized that Jesus was alive and Jesus ascended. Guess what they did? They went and hid in a room. Why did they hide in a room? Because the persecution had already begun. We're talking about a context of persecution where people were losing their freedom, they were losing their possessions, they were losing their families, and in the midst of all that, they were coming together with gladness of heart. And attenders come in and they have a joy about them that transcends any kind of circumstance because of what's on the inside. Number 8, and finally, attenders are authentic. You see, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart. Attenders were authentic. They didn't come in here and talk the good game, quote the Bible, pray in King James language, whatever that means, and then walk out and then live like the devil Monday through Saturday. We're talking about authentic people. They were sincere in their hearts. Gandhi's story is well known. Gandhi looked, he was even interested in Christianity, and he decided he was going to reject it. And his statement years later was, "I like your Christ, I don't like your Christians." You want to reach people the way that they did, you have to live out there the way that you talk in here. Now, what does this mean? What is it that I'm asking from you? First of all, I would say get involved in a class. If you're not already involved in a class, just come and start trying them out. I mean, I know in churches where I have served, I've just told folks, I said, look, try different ones. Go to one class over here if you don't like it, if you don't, all classes, all teachers, they have their own personality. And that's okay. It doesn't make it right or wrong, better or worse, any of that stuff. It's just different. That's all. And so you walk into one class, and it may just not float your boat. That's fine. Go to a different one. Just go somewhere until you fit in. I remember one church where I served, there was a class of couples. Class of couples, mostly couples, and they were like in their late 20s and early 30s. Guess what? They had one guy in there, and he was in his 70s. He was in his 70s. He walked in there. It was not difficult to figure out who the old guy was in that class, okay? But that's just where he just jived with those other folks in there. I didn't walk in there and be like, no, this is just for upper 20s, lower 30s. The old guys are down the hall. We didn't do that. That's where you're comfortable, go there. But you involve yourself in a class. Get involved and be faithful and begin to apply these things into your life and into your class. And when you're in there, I would say, and teachers, you're going to have to lead in this because you got some students. Not everybody in here is interested in what I've said today, but you might have one or two students who are going to walk into your class next week and they'll be like, okay, you heard what he said last week, now what are we going to do? And they're going to be looking at you, teacher or class leader, for direction in this thing. Listen, here's what you do. Just pick one or two things. You don't have to go 1 through 8. Just pick one or two and say, we need to improve here. We need to change this about our class. One or two things, and begin to make improvements in your class. Then the other thing I want to introduce just one more thing by sharing with you. I went Thursday night. I went to the rodeo in Perry. Anybody been to the rodeo? I think it ended last night. Okay, we got some good rednecks. Good, yeah. Yeah, man, feeling rednecky. It was fun, man. I've been to the rodeo before. It's cool. I like going to the rodeo. And you go to the rodeo, and it starts off with bucking broncos, okay? Ends with bucking bulls. That's just how it is. And those guys get on there. These guys are nuts, man. They got a death sentence on their head. They get on those things, and those big old animals that are throwing them all over the place, I don't see how their necks can take it. Man, they're leaning back on that thing, and their heads are whipping back and forth, that noodle neck. I don't see how they do all that. And they get up there, and they've got 8 seconds. That's all they got. 8 seconds. That's all they can be on there. Well, that's not all they can be on there. That's what they need to be on there in order to place. And they go through, and they go up, and they go down. And they go up, and they go down. 8 seconds. 8 seconds is not a long time. Now, I can just only imagine if I'm on one of them bulls, 8 seconds probably feels like a lifetime. But 8 seconds is so short. And it's so much like life. It's just like life. Life, man, when you're in it, seems like you have plenty of time. But man, you blink and it's over with. And in the midst of those 8 seconds, there's a lot of ups and there's a lot of downs. There's ups and there's downs. But it don't matter because you got 8 seconds. And you better, in your 8 seconds that you have, you better make them count. Because before long, it's going to be over with. And we spend so much time, oh yeah, I'll get saved when? I'll get saved when I graduate from high school. I'll get saved when I graduate from college. I'll get saved when I get a family. Oh no, I'll get saved when I retire. Too busy. Sometimes those bull riders wouldn't make it the whole 8 seconds. And you waiting for the next thing, and the next thing you ain't even going to make it to. You just don't know. Oh, I'll get involved in a Sunday school class when they start a new class. I'll get involved in a Sunday school class when that preacher does what I want him to do. I'll get in a class when they change that teacher. I'll get in a class when that person gets out of the class. I'll get there when. Let me tell you something. It's too short. Whatever you got to do for Jesus, you better start now. Because there's no telling when you're going to hit that floor and it's going to bounce you off and you'll be out of the game. And then it'll be too late. Now, in just a moment, we're going to do invitation. And listen, y'all are Baptists. Y'all have done invitations forever. Okay, you know what an invitation is. But now's the time. Now's the time. If you're going to make a decision for Christ, if you're going to be saved, if you're going to deepen your walk with Jesus by becoming a part of a fellowship, if you're going to give your life over to missions, if you're going to share Jesus with somebody, if you're going to do whatever it is, you fill in the blank, what you waiting for? Life's too short. Do it now. Somebody's going to be standing down front, and as soon as I shut up, I'm going to pray a prayer, I'm going to shut up, I'm going to go sit down. There'll be somebody that you're more familiar with standing down front. Don't waste any time. Don't wait. Just come on down. Give yourself to what it is you know you need to be giving yourself to. God, we thank you for the 8 seconds you've given us, for the life that you have blessed us with. But Lord, oftentimes we confess that we take that for granted and we think it's going to keep going on and on and on and on. Lord, help us to confront ourselves with the brevity of life and the short chance that we have to make a difference in your name. Lord, I pray specifically for that person who hasn't, they put off being saved, and they put it off making that public, they put off being baptized, or whatever it might be. That you would impress upon them the need for getting it done and getting it done now. So bless this time as we respond to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Now let's stand together as we respond this morning to the word that we have heard. You come. The altar is open. Pastor Ed is here if you need to speak with someone, but you come as the need arises. I'm giving you my heart and all that is within. I lay it all down for the sake of you, my King. I'm giving